And we are live. All right, cool. Welcome everybody. Thank you for coming to the AMA with Thomas. Thomas is an integration engineer on the Chainlink team over here. He's really important. You've probably seen a lot of his content before, a lot of his PRs. He's written a lot as well. Just really knowledgeable about everything Chainlink. So for those of you watching on YouTube, I am monitoring the chat. So if you have a question, feel free to pop it into the YouTube chat. But for those of you who are attending right now, this session is pretty much just going to be an AMA. If we don't get a lot of questions, we'll hop off early. But I know a couple of people were asking a lot of really interesting questions the last couple of days. So I wanted to give you a chance to ask whatever questions that you want. And yeah, feel free to pop them into the chat. So I see a couple people here. I see a couple people here that I know have questions. So whenever you guys are ready, feel free to pop them in. This is a for you session rather than a us speaking to you. So there's that Q&A feature in the Zoom chat. Yeah, feel free to ask anything that you want.
Well, I guess in the meantime, while we're waiting, some of the latest integrations that we've been working on that have become public is going to supporting Matic and Binance Smart Chain. So I know that the community has seen some PRs related to that. So hopefully we'll be able to get some price feeds up on those networks so that DeFi can spread.
Yes, super excited for that. Yeah, I forgot who was telling me about that. Maybe it was you, but yeah, super amped. All right, so we got our first couple questions coming in. I want to do reputation management using Chainlink Oracle. Which API can I call, or do I have to build one myself?
You'd have to build one yourself, so you can look into reputation.link. Actually, one thing that reputation.link is working on, because they're essentially scraping the blockchain to get all of the information regarding node responses anyway, is they'll be allowing other people like you to come along and basically specify your own reputation criteria. So you could actually be a reputation provider, or kind of like have your own criteria for reputation using reputation.link instead of having to essentially build up all the infrastructure yourself. But if you wanted to go that route, that's what you would have to do, is you would have to scrape the blockchain and keep track of all individual Oracle responses.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited for that. I was showing my last workshop, actually, I was showing reputation.link off a little bit. And some people were asking like, hey, well, do you get punished if you miss a job? And the answer was, well, yeah, you can see right here, you're not going to use any of these nodes that aren't responding. And then reputation.link and everything that they're building are going to be places to do that. So that's really exciting.
So, yep, they are definitely building up that history already.
Yeah, for sure. So good question.
Yeah, I mean, some nodes just go down. Even, all nodes do at some point, as you're familiar with. But in the long run, say you're going to build up a sort of like response uptime of a certain number of nines, where they deal with 99.99% for 4 nines, and of course the more nines, the more uptime you have.
So what is an AMA? An AMA is an ask me anything. So you can ask Thomas any question. Next question is, when's staking? Usually I just say, I don't know, and then move on, but maybe that's better for you.
Really, it's more like when because the implementation of staking is maybe 10% of the work, right? It's to be candid, it's not too hard to make the staking contract. What's hard is getting the economic incentives correct. So that's where research has to continue, because that's part of what we're actively researching. So that's probably as much as I can really talk about. But I think that that's more information than anyone's ever really gotten on it anyway.
Yeah, no, and I think that makes a lot of sense. The answer is, hey, there's a lot that goes into it. But the current system, works really well even without it, and that's just kind of like a further improvement, which is really cool.
Yep.
Are you not using some kind of strategy in determining the reputation of Oracle providers in Chainlink?
That's where reputation providers can use their own strategy. So again, I'm going to fall back to reputation.link because they're the only ones that I know of that are really farthest along in really Chainlink Oracle reputation, which is their product. So I think they'll be releasing their own white paper that actually details exactly how they are measuring Oracle reputation. So that will actually be very transparent so that node operators can see the criteria and know basically how they can be successful. Cool.
Yeah. And then just to build all that, that's kind of goes into the ecosystem of Chainlink oracles. So just keep in mind that Chainlink is a technology, right? It's not a company. It's something that anybody can build. And so, what Thomas is saying is that, anybody can spin these up. Anybody can have their own reputation metrics, almost in the same way that there are different, credit score providers, right? There's none of them are coming to mind right now. Experian. Equifax, is that another one? Yep. There's a bunch of different credit cards, credit companies, and there's a lot of different, like you've heard of the credit ratings for different stockbrokers and stuff. It's kind of the same thing. Anybody can build their own. Good questions here. Next question. I want to find out more about what type of data Link can provide. Where can I find more information about this?
Well, that's kind of more like Chainlink can provide any kind of data that you can get. It's just a matter of how you want to consume it on chain. So right now, the Chainlink nodes are limited to only be able to provide one EVM word in response to direct queries back on chain. One EVM word is 32 bytes. That's pretty limited, right? So that's basically you can retrieve price info, maybe market change info, stuff like that. Very short bytes 32 value, but that's kind of hard to deal with if you want to retrieve a lot of data at once. Right now, if you want say multiple values of some piece of data, you kind of have to pack them in some creative way in an external adapter, which is what we commonly do right now. So say you want the price of something and the timestamp of when it was observed. So you could make a external adapter to kind of pack that into 32 bytes and retrieve that on chain. And then on chain, you would actually have to unpack it in Solidity, which is expensive. So what we're working on is called multi-word responses, where with kind of in a future release of the Chainlink Oracle, we're actually upgrading the Oracle contract. We're renaming it to be the operator contract, which that PR was actually just merged. So we are working on that release, and it'll be able to support multi-word answers. Some of the economic difficulties there are actually specifying different payments amount for length of words answered, because the more words that have to go back on chain, the actual more cost incurred on the node operator. So a flat fee of X amount of link per request doesn't really work in a global sense with a multi-word environment. So it's kind of again, there's an economic question that has to be answered, or problem that has to be solved with that. But other than that, as long as the data has an API, hopefully it has multiple APIs associated with the same type of data. You can totally use Chainlink to retrieve that data. Just be aware of kind of data centralization, because all API providers go down at some point, as we've learned.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, super thorough answer there. So I can wrap my bytes 32 in a cast to get multi-word answers.
Kind of, yeah. So like what I've seen commonly is to split split data on chain where like there's a comma delimiter. So EtherRisk does this with their project. If you look at their Solidity smart contracts, whenever a response comes in, they split based on comma delimit, and then they process that info. It's just the downside to that is actually doing this sort of like, it's almost like text manipulation, which is like classic of what you do in pretty much all programs. It's expensive to do in Solidity. So it's an operation that really would work best off chain. It's just we need to be able to support those multi-word answers.
Gotcha. Cool. I live in India and I don't find the relevant oracles locally for finding solution for local people. How can this be solved?
And that's just another data availability problem. So it's more along the lines of you, and we get this at hackathons a lot, like where people want to do some project and then they'll say, hey, I want to get, this data into my smart contract. And we'll ask them, all right, where are you going to get that data? And they, a lot of times they'll say, oh, it doesn't exist. It's like, well, Chainlink cannot just create data. I mean, it could if you can get sort of raw data from different data points, and then you build up kind of like a new data source in an external adapter, but you have to have something to go off of initially. So if you don't have any sort of data source that provides information about local people, then, well, you're going to have a hard time doing a hackathon project, specific to that sort of information.
Cool. Yeah. So next question, we could probably skip this one. Chainlink and Tesla possible. I think we could move on. I don't know if that makes sense here. Does Chainlink need Ethereum B chain or any other B chain to be successful? What is B chain?
B chain looks like it's just shorthand for blockchain.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
it needs some blockchain to be successful, because otherwise we would have nothing to provide data to. The good thing is, since we're blockchain agnostic, it's really getting to the point where if everyone were to migrate off of Ethereum, which a couple of years ago was like a crazy thought, right? But nowadays with gas prices, it's looking like people are actually considering it. Basically, that's not something that would happen overnight. A lot of projects would have to basically come together and actually decide where to go, and we would basically be a part of that, where we can already support multiple chains. We would just already be on those chains wherever DeFi would decide to go. So a big part of that is like token migrations, which is actually something that we're working on with integrations. I've explained it in a few places, but it's essentially, without changing the total supply, you can lock up tokens on Ethereum and get them unlocked on some target chain, so you can go back and forth between the blockchains in that way. But we do tend to prefer using like whatever native token bridges whatever project has. So like, say Polkadot is working on a number of different implementations for token bridges. We would just prefer to use their implementations rather than having to try to build out our own.
Awesome. Yeah, really good question here. And be sure to check out, there's a Tezos workshop tomorrow, actually, and a Polkadot workshop today that will go into a little bit more about the the multi-chain aspect of Chainlink. So I'm seeing two
Tezos.
questions here. Oh, what was that?
Oh, Tezos is another one of those projects that we actually got the creator of Smart Pi to port our smart contracts over to Tezos.
Which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Cool. So we have two questions here on threshold signatures. And this is another one where I kind of go, I don't know, it'll be ready when it's ready. And then I kind of move on. But the question is the same. When will threshold signatures be ready?
Yeah, I would say definitely this year. We're already working on kind of an early form of threshold signatures, where it's very similar, but it uses a sort of off-chain consensus. And this is being driven by the fact that gas prices are so high. So because gas prices are so high, the benefit here is we only have to use one transaction going back on chain. So that will basically free up a lot of bandwidth on Ethereum. If you think of gas on Ethereum as a form of bandwidth, right now we're using up maybe around 1 to 2% of it in total of the entire network, which is actually a lot. But it's good because it's actually driven by demand. We're only doing it because there's demand for this data. So the benefit of getting to essentially off-chain aggregation, as it's discussed in our white paper, is huge, not only for us but for the entire ecosystem. So we have a lot of focus on that. So I would expect it to come fairly soon.
Yeah, and for those of you who are watching who don't know what threshold signatures are, just to kind of rephrase what Thomas just said, it's a way to aggregate the data off chain so that it's not so computationally expensive on chain. Just as he said. So, could you reduce the economic load associated with the on-chain unpacking of data with the use of a side chain or a pre-chain?
I've never heard of pre-chain, but technically yes. It's just the problem is most projects are on the Ethereum main chain. So most cases are they need all that data on their main chain anyway. Now, since we're getting into a world of more roll-ups and side chains, it's starting to look like Ethereum could turn into a blockchain of hashes, where a hash is only 32 bytes anyway, which is one EVM word. So you could get it to where all of the harder computation is in a sort of side chain, and then the result of that computation is hashed and then placed on the Ethereum main chain, where people could validate that that computation executed successfully. And then basically you have complete the same amount of safety as you have today as if you were just using the Ethereum main chain.
Awesome. Here's actually a really interesting question. Are there additional non-Intel SGX hardware providers on the horizon?
Possibly, yes. It's just right now the main focus is getting to that off-chain aggregation. So and really Deco. So I would say that Deco provides a very good and viable alternative to SGX, in that we can get data assurances without needing like the sort of hardware vendor locking like SGX has. But yeah, like there's been AMD released some kind of competitor to SGX. I don't think that it was very successful. So I mean, a lot of that also depends on the success of that platform, because it takes a lot of work to actually support that, and it doesn't make sense to expend that amount of developer resources to something that would never really be used.
Is Deco linked to Mixicals technically?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to deco.works, which is the Deco site, Deco is a use case within Mixicals. So it's a way of basically proving data without compromising on the confidentiality of the actual data source or of the query. But we can also use it in a price feed sense of, you know, this is actually the result that came back from Coin API or, you know, CoinGecko or Nomics or whatever. And we can have all of those proofs in one payload.
These are all really good questions. Keep coming. I have an IoT device that produces hourly data points. What kind of solution would you recommend for accessing this data via a smart contract, both live and historically?
Well, the good thing about historically with the blockchain is you get that for free, because as long as you're providing consistent data to a smart contract, it's always retained in the history of the blockchain. So if you wanted to, you could always inspect the previous transactions to get that. And, you know, that also has to do with if you wanted to store those previous answers, which is what we do in our aggregator contracts. So like you can get historic data, but it really just depends on how you need to get that data. So say you have some IoT device, if it, you know, posts to some API provider whenever it has an update, or maybe it triggers some webhook or something. What you can do is you can write your own external initiator that uses that data. And whenever basically that IoT device has an update, the external initiator would then trigger a Chainlink run with that data so that the Chainlink node can actually write that data.
Good question here too. Great. Next question. So this is actually a two-parter question, it looks like. It involves two pieces. How will Link be staked in Arbitrum nodes? So we have a little bit about staking and then also Arbitrum nodes.
Oh, so basically I'm not I don't have the most information on that. I'm working with the engineer from Arbitrum on that, and I know that in the first integration that we did with Arbitrum, like basically everything's been refactored. But in general, any sort of staking is more like an economic promise of, you know, data honesty. So you can probably still imagine that at a high level, you can think of it like it's staked to promise that whatever this computation that is done in Arbitrum is going to be done honestly. And the good thing about Arbitrum is any computation can be validated. So anyone would be able to come along and essentially run a validation on the output of what was ran in Arbitrum to be able to determine that that data or that computation was executed successfully. So that's just kind of like, just in general, that's how staking would work. So it's more like how our white paper describes as like penalty deposits. Because yeah, I don't like to use the term staking because it gets people confused with like proof of stake blockchains and delegated proof of stake blockchains, and it's really nothing like that. It really is more like a penalty deposit where I'm locking up X amount of Link and I promise to act honestly. If I don't, at least in Arbitrum, it'll be provable through some sort of deterministic computation, in which case you could have probably something like slashing.
Very cool. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on with Arbitrum and all these other technologies, which is fantastic. This next question is pretty involved, actually. It's a good question. Is it correct to say that staking penalty mechanisms for threshold signatures are binary? You either compute the proper change of Ethereum state based off the EVM output, or you don't. Whereas for arbitrary API calls, it's much more challenging to implement given that it's a median value of all responses. That is to say that staking is simple to implement for T-SIGs, but not arbitrary calls.
I would actually say it's the opposite. It would be, well, yeah. I mean, it would still kind of be simple for T-SIGs, assuming that T-SIGs is off-chain aggregation. So basically, what happens with off-chain aggregation is a payload comes on chain that contains the median value and then all of the signed node responses. So it's binary in that if a node didn't respond, then obviously something went wrong with that node. Maybe the node was down. However, with off-chain aggregation, nodes individually retrieve data from multiple data sources as well. So the final median is really more like a median of medians, such that it should be fairly uncommon for a node to have no response like that. It would actually indicate more of an actual node outage. For individual calls, I'm assuming that that's like sending one request, what we kind of call a direct request, to hopefully not a single oracle. Likely staking with that will be implemented at the service agreement level, where you would already have a number of oracles in that service agreement anyway. In which case, it kind of falls back to that binary decision of did the oracle respond or not. And then from there, you could actually build in more refined criteria of did this oracle respond outside of 5% deviation of the median, stuff like that. So that's where you kind of go outside of what is binary based on like slashing conditions. So that's actually also part of what we're researching is, what is too far outside of the median to slash for. And does it mean we see staking for threshold signatures come soon? I mean, so staking could really, it doesn't have to be just for threshold signatures. It could be for service agreements. It could be for our data feeds. It's not so much that the actual staking implementation is hard. It's the economic factors, which is hard, and it has a lot more to do with value secured than anything.
Awesome. Thank you for that question. These are all really good questions. Like I said, keep them coming. These are fantastic. Back to our Zoom question. Ropsten Testnet has had some problems in the past days. For development,
weeks.
What's that?
More like weeks.
Yeah, for quite some time now. For development, you can use a local node for testing, but for real value, we want something as close to mainnet. How many nodes do you think would create a good testnet for Chainlink developers?
How many? Well, that really depends on what you are good with testing, because Ropsten's not the only testnet. There are actually 3 more testnets. There's Kovan, Rinkeby, and Gorley, and we'll be adding more Gorley stuff to our docs. And it's kind of looking like Gorley's going to take the place of Ropsten, as kind of like our main testnet, because it's another multi-client testnet. And since it's not based on proof of work, it'll be a lot more stable than Ropsten. But yeah, just because of Ropsten being down doesn't mean that you can't thoroughly test a DApp. Not that that's what he's saying, but it's kind of what I'm seeing in kind of the Discord sometimes, where since we have Ropsten listed as the first testnet, that maybe they're just not trying to look at other testnets. Will there be? I'm sorry, I'm kind of skipping one, but just it's relevant. If there will be testnets on other chains, yes. That also just depends on that chain. So like, usually other blockchains have their own testnet chains, and because we use those testnet chains first as well, because we have to test out our own stuff.
Cool. Yeah, you're on the YouTube too.
Yep.
Great. What future smart contract dApps are you most excited about? And what areas of development would you like to see developers focus on?
Not sure. I've been really hooked into DeFi lately, so I haven't really had my head up outside of that. I really well, so I guess that kind of answers the question. I really like I really like DeFi. I really like the fact that a smart contract can be my bank. So anything that really empowers that gets me most excited. Areas of development to see developers focus on. Well, really usability. So like still there's kind of like a test of like, you take some non-technical family member and, just kind of throw them into like say using Aave. What struggles do they run into? You'll actually find that it's quite a lot. So basically making accessing the blockchain easier for anyone is I think important enough that I would like to see more focus on.
Cool. Good questions. Back to talking about testnets. What does a perfect testnet look like to you?
Reliable, block time similar to mainnet. But really faucets that give a lot of test ETH. So Gorley gives I think like over 80 ETH for every 3 days, which is great. That's plenty to test with. Yeah, something that I don't like about Rinkeby is I have to remember to hit up the faucet every 3 days because when supporting a testnet actually takes a lot of ETH because we're constantly writing data to it. So actually, if anyone's a Rinkeby whale, hit me up.
Actually, so this is a good question from me. Do you think that Gorley would be sustainable then if they're going to do 80 ETH?
Oh yeah, it's proof of authority, so they can like they can literally just basically print as much ETH as they want. They can hundreds of billions of trillions of ETH. It doesn't matter. It's a testnet. Who cares?
Gotcha. And that's where ETH2 stomping grounds are, right? In Gorley?
I'm not sure. It's still ETH 1.0 testnet. That might be where they're testing out the staking contract where you deposit your ETH. Right. Maybe.
Guess we'll find out. Cool. So does this mean we could see staking after threshold signatures come soon after T-SIGs are implemented, or is it an area that still needs research?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's an area that still needs research, but I mean, technically it would be after.
Will there be testnets on other chains?
Yeah, I hit that, and that's where we use. That's where we use testnets on other chains.
Yep. How will link token swaps work? Example: link on ETH to link on Polkadot, etc.
Yeah, so the good thing about Polkadot is they're one of the ones that are actually implementing their own token bridge. So eventually, you should be able to find some literature on exactly how it'll work specific to token bridge. In general, so like a general like say Solidity to Solidity token bridge would be sort of like a contract that you would send your link to, and you specify your address on the target blockchain. And then on the target blockchain, that same amount of link that you sent on the previous blockchain is sent to the address that you specified in that original transfer. And then to go back, you would just specify your address on ETH while on the target blockchain, and then you get that same amount unlocked on Ethereum.
Yeah, token bridges are really cool stuff. Can you please elaborate on the use cases in DeFi area? Just a couple examples to get my wheels turning.
Yeah, I mean the biggest thing to look into is Aave, I think. And basically a lot of the things that they're doing, because they're touching on a lot of different areas of DeFi. They just released a couple weeks ago a blog post on their Aave V2, where they have a lot of features that I'm really looking forward to with that are coming to their platform. But essentially, like, what you can do with Aave is really powerful, I think. So use cases that build off of that would I think be really well. I mean, I think that would be enough to get your wheels turning.
I think so too. This is an ambitious question, but let's say staking, threshold signatures, and mixed calls all get implemented flawlessly and the network continues working well. What's on the horizon after those?
Yeah, that's a great question too, because basically software continuously has to be updated anyway. There are always better methods of doing things coming along. Then there's also this thing looming on the horizon of ETH 2.0, where, well, I guess I'll talk about it anyway. Where essentially what we would like to do is use WASM in Chainlink, so that you could basically create an off-chain program essentially that runs in WASM, and then that would actually run in Chainlink nodes, which I think is really cool, because then you could have sort of like legacy style developers coming along that have been, writing their programs in C++ for years and years and years. They don't need to learn Solidity anymore. They could use C++, which is the language that they're, most comfortable with, and just kind of basically have to learn to use it within a new framework, which, anyone would have to be able to do to work within WASM anyway. And I think that would really open up a lot more use cases, basically, of being able to run sort of like off-chain computations in Chainlink nodes. So I mean, there's that, and then there's also SGX has been really popular with researchers to kind of poke holes in, but long term, what that's doing is it's making it possible for there to be stronger enclaves. So, in the future, likely we'll see better enclaves, in which case then we would want to support those, assuming they're better, which means they get used more, stuff like that. Or, even SGX could still be improved, because it's not like Intel's not doing anything with it. So there are, there's still plenty to do, and more blockchain support, stuff like that. So yeah, it's never ending anyway.
It was a fun question, actually.
Yeah.
Cool. So with T-SIGs, through though consensus is done off-chain and then a single piece of data is posted on-chain, doesn't that make it easier to economically slash all nodes if they all sign incorrect data? In contrast to non-T-SIGs, where it's challenging to determine who is slashed and what deviation from the median is slashable.
Well, actually, that's kind of where Deco would come in as well. So it's not just that they're signing incorrect data, because we would be able to prove if the data that they are supplying is actually supplied by the data provider. So that would be like a slashing condition. If they were a malicious oracle, they tried to tamper with the data payload given back by the API. So let's see if I missed anything in that. Single make it easier. So yeah, I mean, it kind of does. So like what you could do is say there's a single large payload that comes back on chain. And I'm just speaking like very abstractly here, because we're still working on the actual details of of like the mechanics of how this will work. But just say, for example, we post a large data payload on chain. We only need to store the result of that, and then we can emit a log of the rest of the data, and then say let's store a hash representing all signatures of all oracles. What we could do is open it up to where then anyone would be able to like slash a node if they didn't respond. Outside of that, by providing that same the entire payload again, we would make sure that that hashes to the hash stored on chain, and then we could go through whatever criteria on chain to do slashing. Now, if an oracle is malicious and say a data payload doesn't validate off chain, that would probably never even get back on chain, at least not in a sense that it would be used along with the answer. So like you could consider that as part of a different section of that payload. So, maybe they could be slashed on that response, and it doesn't have to take that sort of like second calling. But again, I'm just speaking at a very abstract level. This is part of the stuff that's not that doesn't. It may not have a public spec yet.
Right. And then for a lot of this, once it goes live, then there'll be more, firm information on it. So
yeah, we'll have to write a lot of docs
yes,
on how it works.
For sure. Should LP always be bought via main ETH network for staking plus receiving biweekly dividends? It seems orders take a long time to follow through via this network, even with greater than 20 ETH orders. I'm not sure I understand that question. Do you?
I think it might be talking about link pool.
Should link pool always be bought via main ETH? Oh, maybe. I don't know if it makes sense to buy link pool though.
Well, that's where so link pool has their own token that is basically it's been a while since I've looked into it.
I didn't even know that link pool had a token. Oh, cool.
Yeah, so that would be more of a question for probably for Eric and for the link pool Slack, because I'm I'm just not as familiar with buying the LP token.
Yeah, you can find Eric and the link pool team. They're usually in the Chainlink Discord as well. But yeah, if you join the link pool Slack, they're probably in there. I didn't even know they had a token. Huh. Good to know. Next question. Will there be a Chainlink token on XDAI via OmniBridge, since any contract that works on the Ethereum mainnet can be easily redeployed to the XDAI chain?
Yeah, I mean, that would be another like sort of like treat it like a side chain, where if there was sufficient demand for, like, say, if a lot of DeFi projects want to go to that, then since they already work with Solidity, it would be fairly easy to support that chain. In which case, we would just go through the building an external initiator that would watch XDAI, and really, OmniBridge, is that their own token bridge? Let's see real quick. Because if it is, then sweet. It's less work.
Perfect.
On us.
Cool. Is there an onboarding / registration process to be a data provider in the Chainlink ecosystem?
I'm assuming that a data provider, they mean being a node operator. And yes, there is. For the most part, we've only been taking extremely highly reliable, basically you can think of them like shops, where it's their job to provide blockchain infrastructure. So that's why you see a lot of the node operators on our feeds.chain.link site. They're actually validators on other chains. That's because they are kind of like the most knowledgeable on the sort of infrastructure that we're going to require them to run. In the long run, when there's like, like a sort of public reputation system and stuff like that, then at least for our feeds, we would then be able to sort of look at opening it up. But for now, basically, you could create your own Oracle feed using whatever nodes you want. But the sort of onboarding process is specific to the feeds that we sponsor, we pay for to provide on chain.
Yeah, good question. And just to add to that too, Chainlink's a modular system, right? So if you want to build your own nodes and have your own network and have your own whatever you want, I mean, you absolutely can do that, right? Chainlink is designed to be kind of this new economy. So you can absolutely spin up your own Chainlink nodes, and all that can be found in the docs as well. So
not only that, but you can actually go beyond that, and you can actually spin up your own data feed, and you can fund it, and you can control what nodes write to it. It's just the thing there is you have to fund it, which which can be expensive with on-chain aggregation with every node that you add to it, right? So that's really that's another driving factor behind getting to off-chain aggregation.
Sergey sort of hinted Chainlink Labs announcement. Can we expect to see any kind of formal roadmap anytime soon?
I'm not sure about that, because the problem that I have with like formal roadmaps with hard dates is they don't account for a change in environment. So like, say for example, early on when we first came out with the Golang node, we were very focused on service agreements, right? When that kind of follows the direct request model of a requester creates a request and receives a response, and then DeFi happened, and it kind of we had to really rethink about how that interaction occurs, because DeFi doesn't want to create a request and then wait for a response. They want to be able to read data and enact on it in the same transaction. So imagine if we had come out with a roadmap in 2017, just sticking us with that direct model. We either, would have had to change it, and our community is very loud about things like that, or we would have to stick with it, and we would have missed DeFi. So essentially, being able to change with the environment, it's a greater benefit than releasing a concrete roadmap like that. And that's also where we have our development. It occurs on GitHub. It's all public. We also have a pivotal tracker, and I'm going to try to get everyone more into the habit of using the public label on stories, because essentially we've grown so much that having a single pivotal tracker was actually just too noisy. So we have multiple teams within development, and then we each have our own like pivotal tracker. And then if we assign stories with the public label, it'll kind of like be aggregated into the public pivotal tracker. So we really just need to get more into the habit of using that public label.
Awesome. And just a heads up, so I know this goes to for another 11 minutes. We're probably going to be closing up in another 4 or 5, just so that we have time for to set up the next talk. But these have been fantastic questions so far. There have been some talk about having a lot of issues with data providers, even with premium API data. Any insight on that area? How that would improve in the future? So there's like a pre-existing condition here a little bit.
Yeah, so that's where, and I think Johan posted in the Discord and with the reference contracts updates channel. I know it's a public channel. There hasn't been any discussion in there after Johan's post. But basically, he's talking about the Flux aggregator. And that's going to be, we've actually already started rolling this out to mainnet. And the benefits here are, if basically a node can watch multiple data providers per feed per node, right? So say I'm looking at CryptoCompare, Coin API, and CoinMarketCap. Just my node is for one feed. If CoinMarketCap goes down, I still have two other data providers that are, assume they're up. So, basically, as long as I have one data provider that's up on a feed that I'm looking at, my node is going to be able to respond. And that's where we get into, now the feeds are going to be a median of medians. So we've been able to decentralize them even further, which makes for even more reliable node networks. So it's more like it's already improving today.
Excellent. Can you provide any insight into the recent high Ethereum gas prices and how that might affect Chainlink short and long term?
Yeah, so I mean, it's costed node operators more to respond on chain. So in response to that, we've updated how much we pay node operators. So essentially, they're not eating a loss for every response. And that's really that's the big driving force behind off-chain aggregation. So yes, the team has discussed that, and that's why it's getting so much of a high priority, because with really even with the Flux monitor, which is what we're already rolling out, we're going to see kind of a lift of the amount of economic bandwidth available to Ethereum. Because with Flux Monitor, nodes monitor price feeds individually, and then when they individually detect deviation compared to the answer on chain, they will post an update to the aggregator contract, and then that will notify the other nodes on that price feed to also write their latest answers in response to that.
Awesome. And then we're going to have this be the last question. This next question, I will answer this last one. Who plays Link, Oracle, or Caller? I will just answer that right now. It is the Caller, not the Chainlink Oracle. But our last question for you, Thomas, and thank you again so much for being here. This has been fantastic. There's been a lot of speculation on Swift and statements from Chainlink on ongoing work with Swift. Is there any update on what form of work is going on here, e.g. relative to, and I know you're on YouTube too, so whatever that is.
Yeah, so that ISO standard is just like, it's a specification of data. So like if you look back at the early POC, it's a POC around, what was it, bonds in a smart contract. But for the most part, when people come to us and they say, hey, I want to execute a Swift payment, really what they want is they want a bank payment. Right. So either if you want to do some kind of bank payment, either through ACH or whatever, you most likely need like a partnership with a bank to be able to access that bank's API. So you could totally do that with Chainlink. It's just that's the bigger hurdle, is people will come to us and say, hey, I want to execute a Swift payment. And they're like, okay, great. What bank are you working with? So realistically, if you want to do a off-chain payment, and I don't see the community talking about it a lot, is we have two external adapters in particular that can be used without a partnership with a bank, and it's Dwolla and PayPal. And I like Dwolla because you can essentially use the Chainlink node as like an arbiter between payments of two different parties. So if these two different parties agree on the identity of the Chainlink node to facilitate the payment between them, then you can essentially have a blockchain that does off-chain payments today. Like this is something that you could build in the hackathon today. Right. So yeah, the ISO standard, it's just a data specification. It's not like relatively difficult to deal with.
Awesome. And yeah, for those of you who are watching, who are in the hackathon, you know, exactly what Thomas said right there. You can build something with those adapters, you know, right now as part of your hackathon piece. And that would be really fantastic because you can do these really powerful things like, you know, paying someone out in a fiat currency as opposed to a cryptocurrency. Because, you know, there's a lot of people out there who still don't understand crypto or they don't have a wallet or something. And so you can use those adapters, those external adapters to pay them out, which is really fantastic. Well, we are going to close up here. Thomas, thank you again so much for being here. It's great to hear kind of more insight from some of the core people working on the Chainlink project. It was great to have you, and thank you so much.
Yep, thanks.
All right, and thank you everybody for the fantastic questions. So I'll see you in the next workshop.